Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and this is the fourth video, but the second one in this current section of my Images with Core Data series. In this video, we'll be seeing how we can respond to opening documents that have been received from other devices or applications for types that our application will recognize. We'll decode the JSON received and create a new object in our version of the app. Then we'll take the next step to see how we can zip up both the JSON and the image before sending, and then reverse the process on receipt. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. If you haven't watched the first 4 videos in this series, I recommend that you do that, or at the very least, video 3 in this series where we start the process of sharing objects between devices. If you didn't complete the code from lesson 3 and you want to work along with me, you can download the completed project from that video and start from there. When we receive data, we want to be able to create new MyImage items in SwiftUI, and we have an onOpenURL function that we can access at the app entry point when our app receives and needs to open a document or file. This is the OpenURL function that provides us with the URL for the location that the data has been stored. Remember that inbox in the Documents directory? Well, that's the URL with the file name appended as the last path component. So let's add that function now in the app entry point where @main is. So it's onOpenURL that will provide us with a URL that we can then use in the body of this function. Well, let's first open our ShareService now and create a new published property that we want to observe changes in. And this is going to be optional, and it'll be an instance of our codable image type that our package currently contains as JSON. Next, create a new function called restore that will accept that URL, and since we have created an instance of that, we can call this function in the body of our OpenURL if we want. First though, we'll need to check to see if the URL's path extension is equal to our static class extension property for the extension. Well, if it is, we're set to go. We can use FileManager to decode it for us. So in FileManager, create a new function called decode JSON that'll have one parameter from URL, which is a URL, and it will return an optional codable image. So if it fails to decode, we can return nil. We'll be trying to decode, and that can throw an error, so we'll use a do catch block. In the do block, we first let data equals by trying to get the data from the contents of the URL. If that fails, we print the error's localized description and return nil. If it doesn't fail, however, we'll need to do another do catch block. In the do block, we can return the result of trying to use the JSON decoder to decode a codable image type, so self, from that data. If that fails and throws an error, we'll catch it again and print the error's localized description and then return nil once more. Returning then to the ShareService, we can add to the restore function. First, we'll use ifLet to assign to the codable image the results of using the FileManager's decode JSON from that URL. And if it's not nil, then we'll assign that codable image to the codable image on self. In the MyImages grid view, which is our first view, we can add then the environment object that will give us access to the environment's ShareService. So we'll create the ShareService as the environment object, and we'll need to fix the preview provider by injecting an instance of it into the preview as well. Now that we have access to the ShareService, we can watch for changes on that codable image published property. If it's not nil, we can use an ifLet to unwrap it. Then we can use another ifLet to create a My Image that is the first one from the My Images array where the ID matches the one in our quotable image. If it finds one, then it must be an update to an existing image. Else, we'll need to create an entirely new object. Well, these two functions are going to require access to the managed object context so that I can add or update an object, and I don't have access to that yet. So we need to create a property that's going to access the managed object context key value from the environment. We'll call that mock. I find though that I'm going to run into an error. I'm not entirely sure why, but the fix is easy. In the app entry file, create a constant that will access the managed object context or the view context from an instance of the My Images container. And this is what we did previously here. And this is going to guarantee a single managed object context. And then we can pass that constant into the environment as our managed object context. That fixes any issues you might have. Great. So back in the My Images grid view, why don't we create two functions that will be able to do that, those updates or creation of new objects. First then, the restore image function, where we're creating a new one. So if we use iflet to make sure that we have a non-optional codable image, we can create a new My Image object by using our managed object context. Following that, then, we can assign to this new image object the corresponding properties from the codable image object that we have just decoded. So this includes all 5 of the core data My Image entities attributes. Once they've been assigned, we can try and call the mock save function using an optional try. Once we've handled this, we can set our codable image property back to nil and wait for more updates. The second function then is when we're updating an existing image that we have already in our core data. And it's going to receive a My Image object from the onChange function. Again, we'll use an iflet to unwrap that optional codable image. So I can copy all of these assignments from above without that new image property, and then change the root here to be My Image instead of New Image. And then I can just try to call the mock save function. And then once more, set that codable image back to nil. The onChange of codable image can now be updated to call these functions. So in the first case, we'll call the update image info, passing in the My Image that we just found. And in the second, we'll call the restore My Image function to create a new one. When we get a new image, it'll be immediately noticeable because our grid view will change, but not necessarily noticeable when it's an update. So let's alert the user every time we get an update. So create a new private state property called ImageExists and set it to false. In the update onChange case then, toggle that state property. And that's going to trigger an alert. So below the sheet function, let's create that alert. And it's going to just be a simple one. The title key is just going to be the string image updated. And it'll be bound to the ImageExists property. We'll create a button with the label of simply OK, but no action is required. It's simply just an acknowledgement that an image has been updated. Back in the app entry then, we can add the ShareService's restore call, passing in that URL we received in the onOpenURL. Now one more thing before we test. In the restore function, once we've checked that our path extension has been verified and whether we have successfully decoded the JSON or not, we want to remove the item at that URL. So we'll use the try optional FileManager remove item at URL. Let's test this on the iPhone 13 Pro, which, as you can see, currently has no image. At the end of the last video, I asked you to have 2 of the exported myImage JSON files. So if you've not done that, open a second simulator and create 2 new images and export them so that you can find those 2 files in that simulator's documents directory. Drag one of these myImage files onto the app and you see immediately that it gets restored. We're not displaying an image yet because we haven't sent that along, but at least the JSON's being restored and core data is being updated. I see that I made a typo on this beach, but since I didn't create this object, I can't edit it. Let's exit back to home. And now my app's not even being displayed, but I can drag the second myImage file onto the home screen, and the app launches, and it inserts that new object. So now we have 2 in this iPhone 13 Pro. So let's switch back to the iPhone 14 Pro that generated those 2 images and run it. I'm going to update the word beach on this Kameole beach image here. And now I'm going to export it. If I open the Documents folder, I can locate that exported myImg file. That's the updated one. I'm now going to get that iPhone 13 Pro simulator, or whatever your second simulator is, onto the screen. And you know that the app's not running on this device right now. But if I drag that file that I just exported onto the home screen of this simulator, the app launches. An alert is presented saying that the image is updated, and you can see that that typo has been fixed. Okay, well, now we know we can decode and import JSON, and for many cases that's all you're going to need. But we need to share the image as well, and for that, I'm going to zip both of them up together before sharing. To do zipping, I'm going to use a Swift package from the Zip Foundation. A link is in the description below. Copy the URL for this package and then return to Xcode. From the File menu, choose Add Package and then paste that URL into the search field. Then click on Add Package and proceed. Once it's added, I recommend that you actually build your project. In our ShareService, we can now import Zip Foundation, and we can use any of its functions, but we're only going to use one of them. And that's going to be the one that's going to allow us to create a new archive. So we'll create a function called zip files with an ID parameter that's going to be a string, and this is how we're going to uniquely identify our files. I'll create a URL for what I'll call archive URL by starting from the documents directory and then appending the path formed by our ID with our static extension using that string interpolation. Next, we can use the Zip Foundation's archive struct by using a guard check to unwrap it by passing into the archive object the URL we just created with the access mode of create, which is going to create an empty new archive. Else we'll return if that failed. It shouldn't. So this creates an empty zip package. And this package is going to have to contain the image and the JSON. So I'm going to create 2 new URLs to locate both. The image URL will be that found in our documents directory by appending the path by forming the ID and the JPEG extension. Well, the JSON URL will be the same path, but using the JSON extension. Now, currently, my JSON extension is myimg, so we're going to have to change that back to JSON in just a second. Then we can add these two files to the archive in a do-catch block by trying to call the archive's addEntry function with the last path component of each of our URLs, which are both located relative to the current document directory. So we do that for both of our files. Once we've added the JSON to the package, we no longer need it. So we can try to use the FileManager's remove item function at that URL. We need to keep on to the image, so we're not going to delete that one. If any errors are thrown along the way, we catch them and print the error's localized description to the console. Well, back up in the Save My Image function, let's make sure that we change the file name for our JSON file to use the JSON extension. Then, after we've actually saved the JSON with that call to the FileManager function, we can call our new zip function, passing in our quotable image ID as the ID, and then that will proceed to zip up the file that we've just created along with its image. So I'm going to test this on the iPhone 14 simulator. First, let me delete that old myimg property that's just an image, and I'm going to run the app. Let me select one of my images, and I'm going to choose to share it. The alert, of course, is asking me for my name, which I'll enter, and then I'll tap on OK. If I return to the Documents folder now, I see that we have a new myimg file, but this time it's a zipped container. Well, now that we have that package all zipped up, when we drag and drop it onto another simulator, we'll have to reverse the process by unzipping it and then decoding the JSON. So in the FileManager extension, I want to create a new function called moveFile that's going to move the zip archive from the old URL, which is going to be our inbox, to a new URL, which is going to be the Documents folder where I'll do the unzipping. So the function will first check to see if a file already exists at the destination. If it does, we'll try and remove it. Now, it shouldn't exist because we should have removed it the last time we imported, but we're being thorough here. Then we can use a do-catch block to try and use the FileManager's move function to move from the old URL to the new URL. That's moving from the inbox back in now into the directory itself. If an error is thrown, we'll print the localized description. So in the restore function then, let's make our code more readable by creating constants for our various file names and URLs. First, the file name will be the URL's last path component, what we get from that onOpenURL. That's going to be our file name. Our JSON name will be the same ID property, but a different extension. So I'm going to replace occurrences of our static ShareService extension property, which is myimg, with simply the string JSON. And I'm going to repeat that to create a constant for zip name and for image name. I'm just going to replace the extensions with zip and JPG, respectively. Now that I have those file names, I can form new image URL by appending to the documents directory that image name. And then I can do a similar thing for the zip URL. Then I'm going to create another one called unzipped JSON URL that's going to be formed by appending the path for the JSON name. And I probably should have just called this JSON URL. And now within that block where we've actually checked to see that our path extension is the correct one, we'll try to move the items out of that inbox into our documents directory. And then before we go unzip, we'll try to remove any existing images that are already at that image URL path, because if it does exist, we'll be replacing it by the new one. And now that I've actually deleted any existing image, and I have all my path names and my URLs all set, we can finally use a do catch block to use FileManager's native unzip function. And that unzip item function will receive the zip URL and unzip those files directly to the documents directory. If that fails, we can catch and print the error's localized description again. Now our JSON is no longer at the original URL location in the inbox, it's now in the documents directory. So we need to change that and append the path for the JSON name. And then once everything has been unzipped and decoded, we can remove the zip file that's now at that zip URL, which is right there in the documents directory. So we've moved our zip file and renamed it, we've unpacked it, we've decoded, and now we've deleted any remnants of that zip file. So let's test. I'm going to run the iPhone 13 simulator with those two items that have no images. Let me open the directory for that iPhone 14 where I just saved that zipped archive with the myimg extension. And as soon as I drag and drop onto the simulator, we see that both now the image, when we open it, and we see the rest of the core data properties, including where and whom it came from. If I open the documents directory for this iPhone 13 Pro, I can see that the image is there. There's no JSON file or zip file or myimg file in the inbox. They all got removed after we unzipped and decoded. Great. Well, that's it for today. We have one more thing to accomplish in the final video in this series, and that is to learn how we can attach that saved object to an email and send it to someone else. We'll then be able to delete that item from the documents directory after sending. On the receiving end, when we receive it, we'll see how we can open an email and find out how we can get that attachment into our application. So if you're enjoying this series, I really would appreciate a comment and a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel so that you're made aware of all new videos that I publish. Thanks for watching.